Welcome into the Rumbles of Red. My name is Trevor Steinbacher, and I am your host. Thank you for joining us here on the YouTube Live. Feel free to interact with the show through the live chat. You've got a comment or any questions for us throughout the show, jump in there. We'd be happy to answer it. And I say we because we have a special guest tonight. I'm pumped to have him on the show, LaQuan Jones of RealDealFantasy. LQ, thanks for jumping in here. How's it going?
Yeah, no problem, bro. I'm glad to be here. Everything's cool on this Sunday night without, getting the depressing news of Aaron Jones signing to the Packers, but I'm sure we'll cover that, right?
Absolutely. Before we get into too much fantasy talk, tell the listeners, kind of your experience in the fantasy community, how long you've been putting out content.
Oh, wow, man. The fantasy community is great, man. It's not always open arms. We have a couple trolls that, try to bring down the spirits, but overall, the community is amazing, man. It's been awesome since I joined it. It's been, I think, almost a year and a half, almost 2 years now that I got into the Twitter fantasy football community. But overall, I've been doing fantasy content for 3 years now. This is pretty much the year that I wanted to take it serious and take it to the next step. And I really feel like the fantasy community definitely helped that. They gave me opportunities and, gave me eyes that, helped me out actually in this journey to make my content better, to get the reps.
Absolutely. And I know that as somebody who's really just a rookie in the fantasy community, I feel like I've been welcomed to open arms, and everybody's willing to jump in on the show, retweet things, share things. It's been awesome. I thoroughly enjoy it. And like you said, there are definitely days. I think it was just a couple weeks ago I got on there, and everybody was like, what happened yesterday on the fantasy community? And it happens, unfortunately, but we try to just spread some positivity around here.
Exactly. Those are the dark days, the rainy days where, the news is low, there's not really much going on in fantasy or football related at all. People are bored, and you get the trolls that come out, get the burner account.
Well, we're going to talk plenty of fantasy stuff. I want to hear your thoughts on some of the news that's happened over the last week, really, since the new NFL season kicked off this week with all the franchise tagging or lack thereof with some of them. And of course, I need to hear a little bit of a Logan Thomas take at the end of the show. But we're going to scrap everything, anything that we've prepared for. We're going to scrap it. And we're going to talk with the most recent breaking news. What was it, 3:30 Central Time today? Aaron Jones gets signed 4 years, $48 million, if I remember seeing it correctly.
Yeah.
2017 fifth-round pick and 2 straight top 5 finishes as a running back in fantasy. What are your thoughts here with Aaron Jones going back to the Packers?
Man, Aaron Jones back to the Packers. For fantasy, it brings me joy being that, I do have shares of him in some leagues, and he's still going to give me, RB1 numbers during the week. But then there's other leagues where I have shares of A.J. Dillon, and we all expected A.J. Dillon to be the number 1 running back. We all expected A.J. Dillon to have this great season, because we expected Aaron Jones to leave. So it kind of brings a damper on that as, A.J. Dillon, guy that has him on his squad that actually did a startup not too long ago, probably 2 weeks ago, and I took him pretty high in the 7th round. So egg on my face for taking A.J. Dillon being the truther, but that's what happens when you draft, even in startups, in February.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with Aaron Jones, last year he was being drafted around RB 14 after coming off of if we're talking just redraft.
Yeah.
Coming off a top 5 year, it kind of felt like people weren't really buying in quite yet. And he goes out, has another solid year. He doesn't have the touchdown equity this year, but improved with the yardage.
Exactly.
I think he's probably going to be around 8 to 10. Are we still undervaluing Aaron Jones going back to the same offense?
I think we're undervaluing him now. I think we need to keep him within the top 7. I think we need to live and breathe with him there and understand that he's on an offense as Aaron Rodgers. So he's going to have the touchdown opportunities. He's going to have those opportunities on the field majority of the time, being that, Jamal Williams is probably not going to sign back. But the good news for A.J. Dillon, guys, he has that opportunity to step up to be the Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams was in there about, he was floating around 40 to 60% of the snap opportunity, biting into, Aaron Jones if he's injured or if he's not. But being that A.J. Dillon steps into that role, I think Aaron Jones needs to still be valued as if, the last 2 years, and taking consideration that he's on a high-power offense with Aaron Rodgers, so he's going to score touchdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody would be surprised he rolls out another top 5, top 7 season next
I wouldn't
year.
be surprised at all. I think you'll be more so – I think you'll be more disappointed of missing out on him if you have the opportunity to get him. If he makes it to the late second round, he's obviously going to go in the early second round. But if he falls to you in the second, the late second, and you miss out on him, you're probably going to be disappointed because he's probably going to put up, first round numbers.
Absolutely. And I would say if you're drafting right now and he's, if there's 5 or 6 running backs go off the board, it's probably ready to strike. What about A.J. Dillon, right? So I was coming in preparing to ask you if I need to sell my A.J. Dillon shares, and now I feel like I just need to hold everything because with this new news and Twitter's gone crazy all afternoon with, you should have sold them or where's my truthers at? But what do you think? Do you think he settles in as fantasy wise, maybe an RB4, back in RB3 in this kind of Jamal Williams role?
Yeah, I think you'll have to play him based on matchup and play him based on if Aaron Jones is banged up or if he's completely out. I mean, A.J. Dillon has the talent. We saw him put up that 154, on 20-plus touches, which was amazing to see. We've seen him get involved in the passing game as well in that game. That's just one game that we got out of him that we were, really impressed from. So I really feel like you hold on to him. Just hold on to him for dear life. You may not be happy about where you took him in the startup, but there's a lot of guys that, that took him last season and got him in the bottom end of the round. So there's no real risk there in Dynasty. But in redraft, A.J. Dillon, man, I think you pick him up in the later rounds, right before you start picking up, I guess the late round flyers, because he's still going to be relevant somewhat into that offense. They're not going to just full send, Aaron Jones after just paying him big money, because if they do that, he gets injured, then it's kind of what are we doing? So I really think after, guys get that big paycheck, they get that contract, some of their reps go down. Not a big regression where we're going to notice him he's not fantasy relevant anymore, but he's going to get a little bit of less touches. And A.J. Dillon, man, he was a high investment. He was a second-round investment.
Yeah.
So they're obviously drafting him for the future. So therefore, the writing's on the wall. So 4-year contract, I don't see Aaron Jones being healthy all 4 years. There's no way. He'll be entering 30. So it's kind of we have to take it for what it is now. So I'm holding A.J. Dillon as long as I can. And hopefully he brings in some flashes where he could be fantasy relevant this year. Yeah,
I think the only person that's going to be spending any value to get him right now is maybe the Aaron Jones manager.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's willing to
handcuff.
He or she's willing to handcuff Aaron Jones and give you a little bit more. But outside of that, I'm on the hold A.J. Dillon train as well.
Yeah.
Let's move on let's talk about some players who don't have a contract yet. And if you're in the chat, let us know how you value these players at this point with not knowing where they're going to be playing. And we'll start with Kenny Golladay. He was top 5 wide receiver 2019, but he's got this injury. It's lingering. It's been a little interesting because you don't know the full impact of the injury, but it kept him out most of last year. Do you think he can get back to that wide receiver 1 value? And does it depend on maybe what team he falls in?
It really depends on where he goes. But here's the thing about the injury. It bothers me. I think if he didn't have the injury, lingering over him going into free agency right now, he'll be able to cash in on the Colts. He'll be able to cash in on one of these other teams that are desperate for a wide receiver 1. But being that he's coming into free agency, not getting franchise tag and having an injury, I think he might end up somewhere on the Jets. Maybe the Jags. I think the Jags would be a nice move, but I think, Urban Meyer's going to figure out what he's going to do in the draft first instead of paying, a Kenny Golladay who's coming into the free agency as hurt. But I really think these teams are going to look at him and they're going to go based off of his 2019 stats of him being a top 5 wide receiver. But you also just have to keep in the back of your mind he's coming off of injury. And I don't think, a team like the Jets will be able to use him to have him be a top 5 wide receiver. That's where, it comes in the situation. It all depends where he goes. So I'm really holding off on Kenny G until I find out dead where he's going. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I saw, I think Diana Rossini tweeted out today about a lot of these free agents are looking for these like one-year deals, not really caring about the money, trying to get back in after the TV contracts. I just think it would be interesting, like a guy like Kenny Galladay coming out here and getting 1 year with the Dolphins. Say dynasty value, that feels like it would hurt a little bit from fantasy, just because you don't know where would he go next. I'd like to see a nice 4-year deal with a good quarterback. Now all right, this guy, he might be able to get back to that alpha wide receiver, that top end, top 5, top 10 wide receiver. It will be interesting. And all the teams that you named is got quarterback situations going on, but those are also the teams that have all the money right now.
Exactly.
It definitely seems like, yeah. Let's go to Tampa Bay. Chris Godwin franchise tagged. I don't think anybody was really surprised by that, but what I was surprised by was Adam Schefter's reports after they tagged Godwin, and then Tom Brady comes out and talks about how he wants OBJ to come to Tampa.
Yeah,
I don't think these 3 wide receivers would do well together. I mean, they all want that action. But how do you see these rumors playing out? Do you see this any merit to OBJ actually going to Tampa?
No, I think this is more so just talking. This is giving confidence. This is like a veteran. This is the GOAT we're talking about. Tom Brady giving OBJ confidence coming off of an injury season, not having the best of time in Cleveland, him finishing wide receiver 25 when he gave us all 16 games. And it's like, OBJ's down right now. He's down mentally, and we all see it. The Browns are probably looking at trading him, and it's probably not public now, but I can honestly see them wanting to trade him because the offense looked completely better without him on the field. And they made a playoff run. They actually were executing plays. Like, it just looked like the chemistry was there without him there. So he may be on the move, but him ending up in Tampa, I don't see it happening. I don't see it, coexisting where you can have Godwin, you can have Evans and OBJ. I really don't see that happening to where, OBJ will mentally be okay with that, because not trying to put that diva tag on him, but he wants to be the guy. He demands to be the guy, because I would never, ever discredit his talent ever as a wide receiver. But when it comes to fantasy, that's my money investment. I have to be cautious with him. So I would never talk down on his talent at all, ever. So if he was to go to a team that doesn't have a wide receiver 1, but has like a solid wide receiver 2, then okay, maybe he'll give us some fantasy relevance. But again, I really feel like he's injury prone right now. So I wouldn't see that making sense financially for the Bucs, and I wouldn't see it making sense for him going to a place where he can't be the guy.
Yeah, I'm thinking, like, teams that come to my mind are like teams that have young guys. The Jets, you're right. They've got I like Denzel Mims, but Mims is the number 2 guy. Maybe he can be number 1, or exactly. The Colts with T.Y. Hilton, kind of older now. Maybe not that.
Most likely leaving. Yeah.
It's just places like that have good wide receivers, but not that alpha, not that number 1 wide receiver that OBJ absolutely is still when healthy. In Buffalo, another, I guess this one wasn't not necessarily a surprise to me either, but John Brown was released, and this is less about John Brown and more about Gabriel Davis and the opportunity that I think that's sitting right in his lap. First year, rookie season, 600 yards, 7 touchdowns. I think that he's primed to step up in this number 2 role. Has the window to buy him in a dynasty league passed at this point? Knowing now that John Brown is released.
No, not at all. He's still not ridiculously cheap, but he's still cheap. You don't have to give an arm and leg for him. You could still give up a Hollywood Brown for him. That I'm 100% doing. You can give up a Singletary for him. I'm 100% doing that as well. All these guys you can give up to go get him. You can give up a Gus Edwards for a Davis right now. That is like the price range where you should be living and breathing there. So I think we're hoping that he can fill into this role. We're hoping that they don't bring in another guy, because free agency is crazy, man. You think some of the things are set up for some of these up and coming stars, and they just get sniped by unnecessary, free agent move. And it happens all the time. It happens every year. But I think in Dynasty, Davis is going to be something special either this year or the next, because I have a couple shares of him. I had a couple shares of him not knowing I had shares of him, to be honest. I just kind of just had him just to sit on my bench. But now with John Brown being released, we can honestly see him, flourish. We've seen the flashes. I love what I saw. The little bit that I saw, I loved it. So I definitely think this is more so, looking for the future, the longevity of having shares of Davis.
Absolutely. Yeah. A couple of those playoff games, it seemed like he was the only one catching the ball for.
Yeah.
I don't remember which game it was. It was towards into the second quarter. It was like Davis to the right, Davis to the left. He was all over the field. And I was getting excited. I'm like, this is a guy that I want some shares of in the future. And now even more without John Brown being there. I got one more wide receiver I want to ask you about. And really, I'm mentioning Emmanuel Sanders again. And this is all Saints talk here in a minute. They've been very active this week. They've been very active today with Drew Brees officially announcing his retirement. Again, I don't think we're all surprised, but every once in a while they talk about retiring and maybe a quarterback doesn't actually pull the trigger. But Drew Brees officially retires. Emmanuel Sanders is not a Saint anymore, or currently at least.
Yeah.
They re-signed Taysom Hill to some weird 4-year voidable contract. Who knows what's going on there?
I don't think you'll see any of it. I really don't think you'll see it.
Like what is $140 million? And then you still get all the reports about Jameis Winston is still their number one target. But all that, knowing everything that's going on with the state of Saints and that roster, what about Michael Thomas in 2021? Can he get back to also being that top 3, top 5 wide receiver in 2021? He's currently like the only guy on the team that catches passes outside of Alvin Kamara.
Here's the thing about drafting a Michael Thomas. I hate guys that have high ankle sprains, and those are the injuries that usually linger. I mean, thank God we didn't see Adams, Devontae Adams go out, long term with another high ankle sprain. But high ankle sprains worry me a little bit, and I felt like he kind of forced himself back on the field, and we kind of saw he wasn't fully 100%. So I really feel like with him being the only guy there, it only, he's bound for another injury, being that he's going to overwork himself. He doesn't have that much help. Kamara's there, but it's like he loses value in the same sense, being that he doesn't have Drew Brees anymore. So I know he's going to miss those checkdowns. He's going to miss the decision making, because that comes down to it for a running back or even a wide receiver to get the ball in their hands. It's all about decision making. I like Taysom Hill. I like him for what he is. He's a gadget, but I don't think them going into this next season with him as the quarterback, the starting quarterback, and the sole starting quarterback if Winston actually leaves, that is kind of bad all across the board, being that I don't see him as a quarterback, and defenses sure as hell are not going to see him as a quarterback either. So they're going to expect him to run every single play. And that's basically what we saw, him running every single play, taken away from Alvin Kamara, taken away from Michael Thomas getting those targets, taken away from Emmanuel Sanders as well, getting those targets as well when Michael Thomas was out. So there's a lot of things that factor into, going into this next season if they stick with Hill going forward. So Michael Thomas getting back to that top 5 or wide receiver 1, I don't think it's likely for this season. I might have to kind of pump the brakes on him and redraft. If he falls to me, he falls to me, but I have to have, a wide receiver 1 before I touch him, because it doesn't really even seem possible, because he's not going to fall any further than the late second round, to be honest. You're going to be looking at his name. You're like, am I really going to let Michael Thomas drop to the 3rd or 4th round? No. Absolutely. And that's the problem, because think about it. In redraft, a lot of teams are going to go running back heavy. So it's either you're going running back, wide receiver. Michael Thomas is not going to be there for you in the 3rd round if you're going running back. So I really feel like that's the dilemma here of what you're going to do. If you're sitting with a Michael Thomas at a 208, you're going to be like, damn, I want to take him. I had my star-studded, running back in the 1st round. Do I want to take a Michael Thomas as my wide receiver 1, being that they're having these QB issues and et cetera, and the injury? I just don't know what to do with Michael Thomas. So for me personally, I'm hands off. I'm good. I'll be okay with missing out on him.
Absolutely. What if Winston comes back? Does that change things at all? Or do you have to actually hear Jameis Winston, our starting quarterback?
Yes. I would have to see a solid – no, I will honestly have to hear solid sources, solid, training camp videos of him taking the reps as 1s and them committing to him as 1, them going to the draft and not drafting a quarterback and et cetera, et cetera. A lot of things need to fall in place before I say, all right, cool. Jameis Winston is the QB1. He'll be moving forward, et cetera, et cetera. But something in my gut tells me Winston's leaving. I don't know. I know they're saying they want to keep him, but I think Winston can go cash in for a long-term deal with Washington. I really want to see that.
Yeah, I was thinking, I thought I saw you put something out on Twitter earlier about him going to Washington.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be fun. And I think also if Washington can land one of these wide receivers as well to pair up with McLaurin, that'd be a fun offense to watch with Gibson out of the backfield.
Yep.
I saw this come through. It's mainly a question about salary cap, and I kind of have my thoughts, but the gist of it is, you think some of these owners kind of know what kind of TV money's coming in and know that the salary cap's going to be increasing quite a bit over the next couple of years? Do you think they have more of an insight and knowledge of that's coming? I mean, I think we all know the TV deal is coming, but where that cap will actually be.
100%. They have insight. They have input. They have their sources to let them know, hey, it's going to be a little messed up right now, but this is coming. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I really think the salary cap is a joke. It's not even real at this point because, again, we just saw Aaron Jones get signed to a 4-year deal for $48 million or $47 million, whatever. They had no money. Like, it didn't make sense. And, like, now we're seeing the Saints pull out this $140 million deal for Hill when we know he's not going to see an ounce of it. It's like they're navigating their way somehow to make, to get.
And everybody's picking up on it finally, I think. And everybody's and all the GMs are they know what they're doing as well. I mean, we're Chiefs fans here. I'm in Kansas City, and Mahomes gets a big deal last year, and then he reworks his contract this year already just to save some more. Now he's still getting the same money, but it's all about the numbers and the language, how the actual cap hits, and absolutely,
it's insane. That's why I said it's all fake.
They're playing with monopoly money at this point.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one running back in Chris Carson, who wasn't tagged there in Seattle. Again, maybe we were surprised, maybe we weren't, but for me, I think Chris Carson's his value is sitting in a hold because I don't think it'll really increase a whole lot depending on where he lands. But I'm also interested in your thoughts on who's going to be that running back in Seattle. Is it Penny, or do you think they're going to be drafting somebody? It's just like, what are they doing out there?
So here's the thing. I think there's still a small possibility they re-sign Carson. I could see that happening. But if he does end up leaving, who could be the possible guy? They have to hit the draft, or they have to hit free agency. You can end up seeing a Leonard Fournette there for a 1-year deal cheap. Who knows? But I really feel like they cannot go into the season not having a Carson and then having Penny as their guy when he can stay healthy, with the limited role that he had to deal with. You know what I mean? So I don't really think Penny's ready to step up and show out to be the RB1 for Seattle when they're in a very tough division. and it's like you're still competitive even with your O-line issues, with your running back issues now. I don't think Russell's leaving at all, but Seattle still has, the chance to win a division even with all these problems. So why make it more complicated of having a running back there who's not really ready to be the RB1? So I think Carson, there's a small possibility he signs back. But if it had to go to Penny or a CJ Dallas maybe, or I don't know if they bring in another guy, then I really don't want any parts of Seattle's backfield, even though they've been, low-key good with Carson. But, man, that O-line is terrible as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons I think Russ is stirring the pot, saying he wants out, whether it's he really wants out or he really wants some help out there. There's a reason he's stirring up. He's too good. He's too professional to be doing it just for attention. He's trying to get people in that front office to say, okay, this is what we're gonna attack the offense this offseason, or the offensive line, because we understand our franchise quarterback needs a little help.
Yeah, I mean, it's been like 4 years too long. I mean, 4 years overdue. And it's like we see them go into the draft. They invest in O-linemen, maybe like 3rd, 4th, 7th round, or whatever the case may be. So they've actually made an attempt to help the O-line. But it comes down to your scouting. Like, who are you watching on film to say, yeah, this O-line's good? let's bring him in. Let's try to make Russell happy. But you still are in a division that has Aaron Donald. You're still in a division now that has J.J. Watt, Chandler Jones.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have, all these guys that are coming in the draft, up and coming. These linebackers look amazing to me on the edge. So he's going to have trouble if any of these guys go out there. Oh, did I mention Bosa as well? San Fran. So it's like, come on, man. You have all these young stud, pass rushers coming in. These defenses aren't getting any, less. And I really feel like, they need to buckle down and do some free agency spending, do some, better scouting to help Russell. Because honestly, if Russell leaves, then Seattle's already at the bottom of the table, hands down.
Do you think that Russ will leave?
It's like 30% of me thinks he will. I don't think he will. I think Pete Carroll will not have that happen. One, being this late in the game in his coaching career, why would you do that for some draft picks? And then say you do get a high draft pick, you get a top prospect quarterback, cool, great. You want to start that project all over with possibly the worst line in the league? That doesn't make sense. That's how you get fired. So I don't think he's willing to lose his job over Russell Wilson being unhappy about the line when there's actual resources and tools to help him, give him what he wants. I don't understand how this can't happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think they end up trading him either. I think a lot of it is him just trying to get some extra help, and he's realizing maybe he has to be a little louder to get
like
some
Aaron
of that
Rodgers.
help.
Aaron Rodgers, when they lost that playoff game, I might not be here next year. And then that quickly changed once they put in his head, like, all right, we're going to do better in the draft. We're going to go get you a wide receiver too. We're going to do this and that, even though we just saw Aaron Jones get paid today and they spent a second-round pick on A.J. Dillon.
Yeah.
Hey.
Just ignore what we did last year. This year will be better.
Yep. Sorry about Jordan Love, but A.J. Dillon.
Well, I got two tight ends I want to ask you about. And both these guys, I feel like at one point they were hot names in the tight end world for fantasy. They weren't great, but not a lot of tight ends were great this year. Outside of your Kelce's and Wallers, but Hunter Henry not tagged out there in LA. Are you ready to buy into Donald Parham, a name that was kind of lingering out there a little bit in the dynasty world? What are your thoughts on him?
No. I feel like we saw flashes of him. It's attractive. It's a nice narrative, but Chargers have a chance to let Pitts fall to them, Kyle Pitts. And that's very real. That's actually something that can happen. And I really don't think that the Chargers are going to commit just to him and only him. I feel like more so Henry had to leave, more of a financial thing, being that they weren't going to tag him again, and he has an injury history. You don't want to spend that money and invest in him when you can build through the draft. You have a very young, good quarterback who's possibly a top 5 quarterback. I really feel like it was more of a financial, let go of not wanting to sign him long-term because of injury, et cetera. So I really think that tight end position's up for grabs. I don't think it's his. I definitely think, Chargers make a play for a tight end in the draft.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts with Justin Herbert would be that'd be fun. That'd be fun to watch. Wouldn't be fun to watch on Sunday as a Chiefs fan, but it'd be fun to watch as a fantasy football player and a fan of the NFL just overall. The other one is Jonnu Smith hitting free agency after Tennessee. They don't use their franchise tag either. I don't think I see franchise tags used on tight ends very often, anyways. But
unless you're Hunter Henry,
yeah. And so anyways, for Smith, I see him kind of tied to Buffalo a little bit. Buffalo, I feel like, is kind of tied to a couple different tight ends potentially. Do you think Smith has any fantasy relevancy right now? And do you think that could change if he landed in the right spot?
I think it could change if he landed in the right spot. But my one team that I don't want him to go to is the Patriots. But I can honestly see him going to a team that isn't really tight end friendly, that doesn't really prioritize their tight ends. They just will probably use them here or there. So for fantasy relevance, no, I don't really think I could buy into Jonnu Smith. I was lucky enough to hit on him this year. I got him in like the 12th, 3rd round, and then he ended up hitting a couple of weeks. But it's like, man, overall, I don't feel like he'll fit into like a team that doesn't really utilize their tight ends. And that could possibly happen because it's not like he's like having a, how should I say? He doesn't have a huge market right now. He's not going to cash in big. He's going to be pretty cheap, but we shall see.
I I didn't send this over to you, but what's your philosophy on tight ends when you're on redraft? Just a redraft league. For me, it's if I don't hit Kelsey or Waller or Kittle, I'll pick somebody up in round 16, 17. I will not draft another tight end.
So if I miss out on the big three, if I miss out on Waller, Kelsey, Kittle, or even Andrews, this is my, go-to. If I'm going to wait on the tight end, they have to have at least, 30% target share when it comes to a team that actually uses their tight end. So back way Ben, when Jack Doyle was relevant, I was able to hit on Jack Doyle 2 years in a row, being that the Colts always used him. They always used and abused him. I was actually fortunate to hit on the Eric Ebron year when he went crazy for like 12 touchdowns. You got to sit there and look at the team and understand how their offenses ran. If they only utilize their tight ends in the red zone, then cool, that's fine. You'll have some weeks based on matchups of a tight end being fantasy relevant. When I mean fantasy relevant for a tight end, that's between 10 to 15 points. That's relevant to me. If I can have a tight end that I got in the late rounds and he puts up 10 points this week, that's a win for me because he was only supposed to put up 3 to 4 points, being that he's not on the team that actually uses them. He'll get 3 targets and that's it. So you have to look for volume, a guy that's going to get volume going into the next year, or if he's in a new situation. He has to have that volume. He has to have that QB that's, I wouldn't say really cautious because Mahomes isn't cautious. He understands Kelsey is the alpha out there. But you have a guy like Derek Carr that's making Waller really good because he's cautious. He doesn't take that many chances. He needs that security blanket. So he's like, all right, man, I don't really have that high-profile wide receiver. I'm just going to throw it to Waller because he's my security blanket in the middle of the field, and he can make big plays. So there's that. So when it comes to tight ends, you have to just filter out of what you're looking for and what they can add to your team.
Or find a guy like Tanyan at Green Bay that because Aaron Rodgers throws it. So I don't know the stat, but I bet he has more passes inside the 10-yard line than any other quarterback in the league. It felt like it because they rarely ran the ball. And I mean, obviously Adams had 17 touchdowns and Tanyan had 8 or 9. That was a good hit for anybody who got Tanyan early.
Which is crazy is because they drafted a tight end in the 3rd round. So you're thinking, all right, cool. The Packers just drafted a new young top prospect tight end, and then Tanyan breaks out. So how does that work? So again, another poor draft decision.
Yeah, for the Green Bay Packers.
1, 2, 3, right there, just right on paper for you. But it's crazy about Tanyan. He came up and showed out. His name was buzzing, going into the season, but I didn't really pay too much attention to it. But it's fortunate for the guys who hit on him.
Absolutely. Again, we have LaQuan Jones here from Real Deal Fantasy HQ, just talking some off-season fantasy football. The NFL season restarted. It restarts every March just recently, and free agency starts just here on the 17th, I believe. You can go to subscribe to Real Deal Fantasy on YouTube. I've dropped the link in the description as well. Speaking of your YouTube, LQ, I want to go back. I think it was early March. You did a mock draft. I very much enjoy mock drafts, especially like watching them and just getting some content and getting some like real life. Like, this is why I do it. This is why I did it. Well, at that point, Dak Prescott hadn't been signed yet. And it was a super flex, if I remember right. And you took Dak over Deshaun Watson at that time. Dak doesn't have doesn't have a contract. Deshaun is not happy where he's at. So what was your thought process? Why Dak over Deshaun back then?
I took Dak because I knew Dak, for the simple fact, all he wanted was a long-term contract. And eventually Jerry Jones was going to buckle down. Deshaun's situation isn't the case at all. He wants out. He wants out regardless. He's already paid. That's the difference between him and Dak. So he wants out. He's willing to sit out. And I think he's going to stick to his guns. We might see Watson sit out. So me going into redraft or even startup dynasties right now, I can't really see myself taking, Watson over Dak right now, even though we know that he's paid now. But even before that, I don't think I was going to do that regardless. But I do like Dak and I do like Watson. If they're both on teams that they're happy with and they're both paid, I definitely feel like, they're head up. They're kind of like equal to me. Honestly, they both can extend the play. They both have, good weapons on the offense. Not Watson at the moment, but he did. And I feel like, with that decision, it was a no-brainer. Like, yo, I got to go with Dak. He's actually going to play football this year, regardless of the situation. I don't think, Watson is going to play this year, being that he's still held captive in Houston.
Yeah, I think that's going to be such a tricky situation, potentially all the way up until the first day of the season. I mean,
yeah,
for the first game. And if you're drafting, a lot of people redrafts, they'll wait till that Labor Day weekend or even the week leading up to the first game. And even then they could still be trying to figure out. It reminds me of, it's completely different, but it kind of reminds me of I about said Sean McCoy, but Le'Veon Bell back in 2018. Like, is he going to play? Is he not going to play?
Yeah.
You drafted him. He doesn't play. It hurts your whole season, especially with high profile guys like this in fantasy football, if they're not going to be playing. But now we know Dak, he's happy. He's got a 4-year deal. He will be in Dallas. If you're in the chat, let us know how you're valuing him for the 2020 redraft season. I think he's easy top 5. I would be slow, but potentially put him up at a top 3. I'd like to see how this injury kind of plays out during the preseason. But LQ, what do you think about dynasty value for Dak now compared to the other quarterbacks? Where would you value him moving forward in dynasty?
I'll value him as a top 5. I think he has, CD Lamb. He has Gallup still there. He still has Amari Cooper. That's a good 3 to 4 years right there. You're looking at with a solid core. And I think Zeke is signed all the way up until 2023 as well. So I think you have a good shot and a good window for a solid core. I just think you need to invest in that defense for them to actually start, winning games and get to the playoffs and, make it to the big dance and actually bring it home. So I really feel like that's what they're lacking. But for fantasy relevance, yeah, Dak is a full send for a top 5, quarterback every year. So I'm 100% on the Dak wave.
Yeah, I drafted him quite a bit last year, and the first 4 weeks, I loved that defense. It was it gave up fantasy relevant players.
Exactly.
Gave up fantasy points, and then also Dak then also had to throw a lot more. So it was fun to watch a bad Dallas defense just because it was
true
from a fantasy perspective there. But yeah, I would agree. I could see him. I think I did the ADP right now for dynasty. He's at QB6, right after Allen, right before Burrow. It's still early in dynasty ADPs, right? I mean, we've kind of the season just ended a couple months ago, so it's still early, I'm sure. And now he's only had a week of being signed, so I could see him go up there. I think that if I was in startup right now, I could at least talk myself into taking him second overall after Patrick Mahomes, because he's got all those wide receivers that you mentioned. He's got the offensive core. The offensive line is getting older, but they did restructure a couple of those guys to keep them intact too. So I like Dak a lot moving forward, and just that offense in general.
Hell yeah.
Another pick out of your mock draft. This one I don't believe was by you, but I did see Najee Harris was picked the 17th running back off the board, going ahead of Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Clyde, Edwards-Helaire. This is all we don't know where Najee Harris is even going to be playing football next season. How do you evaluate these rookie running backs before we know where they're going to land, especially knowing, I mean, the situation is key. Look, Clyde ran up the draft boards last year after getting a chance in Kansas City, but so how do you know, or how do you evaluate these rookies when you don't know where they're going to be?
You can't. You really can't. It's based off of popularity and their name. It's based off of the highlights that were, spewed through the Twitter community and all the hype trains of the pro day and all this other stuff. That's usually how you adjust your rankings. You don't adjust your rankings, until you find out where they're going. And it's all based on situation. CEH is prime example for all this to be said, because for the fact that his ADP shot all the way up the moment Damian Williams, opted out because of COVID, he went as high as the 106 in the first round. And that was just going based off of what we saw in the Super Bowl, Damian Williams being robbed the, Super Bowl MVP, going based off of what we know about Kareem Hunt and, Andy Reid's, offense when it comes to running backs. They all eat, and it's fine. But here's the thing. We don't know what this kid can do. We don't know anything. So why are you spending a first-round investment on a guy we don't know what he can do yet. And he had his struggles on the goal line, we saw. That
Absolutely.
is a big issue. That's a no-no. If you cannot score on the goal line for me, I don't want you on my fantasy team. That is like the biggest thing that I'm like pet peeved on. If I'm going to spend a first-round pick on you, that needs to make sense. So I think Najee Harris going that high, man, I think it's more so of just, hey, I like this player a lot. Go get your guy. I'm always a go get your guy, but make it make sense when you go get your guy, because at the end of the day, I'm going to take a Joe Mixon over Najee Harris because I know Joe Mixon is able to produce behind a terrible O-line in Cincinnati. I just know, his foot is going to be an issue as well, but if he's healthy, he's going to produce numbers. He's going to be catching, passes out of backfield. He's going to be the red zone running back. So Joe Mixon over Najee Harris sounds crazy as hell right now because of the names, but I think I'm more so safe today to take a Joe Mixon than a Najee Harris, being that I don't know where the hell he's going to play.
Absolutely. And Joe Mixon is another guy I drafted too much of, unfortunately, because he did a lot of Dak, a lot of Joe Mixon. So the first couple of weeks was pretty nice for me last year. The rest of the season didn't go so
God
well.
Bless you. You made it through, man. You made it through another season.
Tell us a little bit about your philosophy on this Superflex startup drafts. The mock draft thing was, like I said, it's great content. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I saw you guys included the rookies. Some people I've been watching and following will maybe include rookie picks or just exclude the rookies altogether.
Yeah.
But right now, if you're in a startup Superflex, what's that philosophy that you're going in there with, especially around the quarterbacks with the Superflex portion of it?
Superflex, here's the thing. My first quarterback off the board is going to be a mobile quarterback. I need to have the rushing yards. That is number one. I need a guy that's going to be able to run it in once they're on the goal line, if they're inside the 20, et cetera. I need you to be able to extend the play. So number one is get a mobile quarterback. Then my second quarterback will be a guy that can stand in the pocket, pick you apart. I'm happy, getting maybe if he falls to me, Matthew Stafford or a Tom Brady, et cetera, these non-mobile quarterbacks that were able to produce in the pocket and put up touchdowns that can give you more than 25 touchdowns, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a nice balance between a quarterback who's going to give you a lot of points when it comes to rushing touchdowns and to throwing touchdowns, et cetera, et cetera. So he's like a dual threat. So if you get a guy who's not that mobile but scores a lot of touchdowns and interceptions are between, maybe 10 and less, then you're sitting real pretty at that quarterback spot, and you can invest, elsewhere, whatever you want to run heavy at. So that's definitely my go-to for Superflex lead. So if you miss out on a mobile quarterback and you end up with, let's say, a Herbert or whatever, which isn't a terrible pick at all, you better be getting a Jalen Hurts right after that. That would be a nice little combo package right there if you miss out on the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, the Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, et cetera, because mobile quarterbacks, they're going to win you championships, and I believe in that in redraft, dynasty, whatever the format. Yeah,
just getting that extra floor with the legs is huge. We saw it with Kyler Murray big time early in the season, the first 10 weeks or so.
Yeah.
He had a lot. I don't remember exactly how many rushing touchdowns, but it seemed like every time they get close, he'd have another rushing touchdown. And you mentioned the Josh Allens. And so I've seen it a lot of different ways with Superflex. Somebody will go get their Patrick Mahomes 101, and then they might not take a quarterback the rest of the time or later, right? They'll run with their running backs and wide receivers. Mm-hmm. If you're getting that Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray in that first round, you said Matt Stafford, so you'd wait maybe even a couple of rounds until you get that pocket guy? And are you willing to go older with Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford, even as old as like Tom Brady or maybe Drew Brees last year?
Yeah, for the simple fact you can literally in that next year in your rookie draft, you can find yourself a mobile quarterback, a top prospect who will probably fall to you. And that's replacing your Tom Brady who retires. That replaces your Matthew Stafford who retires, et cetera, et cetera. That's how I look at that for the longevity. You can always get that missing piece the next season. Just get the guy that needs to sit in your pocket now to help you bring home the gold.
Absolutely. All right, I teased this a little bit at the beginning, so I want to hear a little bit of your Logan Thomas clip here. He's kind of a name that was he's a little bit popular right now in the fantasy world. I think a lot of people are on the fence. Like which way do they want to buy? Do they want to buy in or they want to get out? You've got a video up on your YouTube page. Again, your YouTube page is in the description. Go follow Real Deal Fantasy HQ on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button for them and go check out the video on Logan Thomas. But give them a quick 30-second. What would they hear when they go check that out?
Oh, man. Redraft versus Dynasty, man. Here's my take on it. It's very interesting. For Dynasty, like, guys, I really feel like you need to be cautious with Logan Thomas because you're going to be spending a little bit to go get him. And to draft him, you're going to have to deal with his ADP. His ADP isn't terrible, but it is a little expensive for my taste, being that he's almost 30, and it took 8 years for him to break out. So this isn't that, 3-year philosophy when it takes 3 years for that young tight end to break out, and you got to get it while it's hot. Here's the thing. Mike Gretzky, he's starting to break out. Last season was year 3, and that was his best season to date, and he finished tight end 6 or 7, I believe. So those are the guys you want to get because he has another 2 to 3 years in him. But Logan Thomas is about to be 30. So we all know if you're not Travis Kelce and you turn 30, the decline is there. You're not going to get your bang for your buck after that year because, again, Travis Kelce, he's a freak athlete. We can't explain why he's so good. He's just good. He blames it on conditioning and discipline and et cetera, but he's a freak athlete. I can't explain it, but there's that. Logan Thomas, he is not a freak athlete. He's just a great athlete in a great situation to where it took him 8 years to break out. So, again, here's my example. Jason Witten, 2013, last fantasy relevant year. How old was he? 30 years old. That next season, huge decline. So that is the issue here. Once you turn 30 and then that year after that, Dynasty guys, you're going to be thinking, hey, I got Logan Thomas. He's hot right now. He's breaking out. He's on Washington. They have Jameis Winston. They have Russell Wilson. Whoever their quarterback may be, you're going to be thinking, oh, man, Logan Thomas has some years in him, but he does not. He does not. He turns that 3-0. It's over. The party's over. You're late to the party. You were supposed to jump on him last season. You didn't, and here we are.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. That's going to lead me into my probably hottest take of the offseason, and that's I think this is the time to sell Travis Kelce in Dynasty leagues. I know he just came off one of the best seasons as tight ends, and I am not selling him as not going to be a top 5 tight end next year or anything there. But he's been tight end 1 for 6 years in a row. He just comes off arguably the best season ever at tight end. Fantasy-wise, he's 100 points better than tight end 3 on the season.
Yeah.
His value will never be higher. I don't believe his value will ever be higher. And you bring in the age factor, and that's exactly right. As the older these tight end age is around that 29, 30 years of age, he's defying the odds right now, just like Gronk defied the odds he was like the young guy that did it right now. Kelsey's the old guy doing it. But I don't think that he's going to not be a tight end 1, but I don't think he's going to be the tight end number 1 over the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah. And his value is just going to start declining. So don't sell him for cheap, but if you can get true high value for him right now to reload for the future, I think that's what it's all about with Dynasty, is getting out at the right time, not holding on too long, and then losing out on what could have been potentially. So that's my hot take for the 2021 offseason is I think it's time to sell him. I think it is time to sell him at the right price again. At the right price. I'd be willing to sell him. I really don't want to be that guy holding on too long just because of what we know and we're comfortable with. Never fall in love with these guys because at the end of the day, it's like their decline can happen off an injury. They could be traded. A lot of things can go into factoring, especially with Travis Kelce, 6 years in a row. That is amazing, but he's getting up there in age, and that O-line just lost some pieces. Absolutely.
I don't know, man.
And he's my favorite NFL player. So, and for fantasy-wise, I'm still willing to depart with him. It's just what you got to do.
Zero. I have 0 shares of any Rams. The last Ram player that I had shares of was Greg Zuerlein, and that was 2016. So it's now 2021. I never get a chance to get my guys, but I do that on purpose because I don't want to root against my guys at the end of the
Absolutely.
day.
Absolutely. I hear you there. Again, go check out Real Deal Fantasy HQ on YouTube. You're going to find that Logan Thomas video. But LQ, they're also going to find a video. Man, I've been like giddy to talk to you about this. You had Mike Wright, Fantasy Footballers, on the show this week. If you don't know the Fantasy Footballers, you're not doing fantasy football the right way, in my opinion. Man, those guys, they're awesome. They're fun to listen to. They keep it real. They have fun with it. And you get Mike Wright on your show. How did that come about? How'd you pull that one off?
Man, you shoot your shot, man. That's all it is. It only takes one shot. And I think, honestly, it was a podcast that I joined. And I think we were talking about like year 2 running backs or whatever. And he actually ended up in the chat somehow. And he just randomly popped in. He was watching. And he ended up, putting his input into what he thought about some of the players. And then later that night, the podcast is over. I see he starts following me. And I'm like, did Mike the Hitman Right just follow me on Instagram, me on Twitter? And I'm like, I think this is real. So I go to the page. It really is him. So, I sent him a message probably like 2 weeks later. Like, hey, man, I got a show coming up. I was wondering if I can get you on and we could talk some fantasy football. He's like, oh, yeah, man, that's great. Yeah, no problem. Let's set up a date and let's do it. And I'm like in awe because he said yes. And I'm just like, man, this is incredible. Like 3 years ago, I was watching him on my 45-minute commute to a terrible job that I had. And he and the other guys, Andy and Jason, just made my day completely better. Just made my morning just go by completely better. There was days where I'll be riding to work for 45 minutes and wouldn't finish their episode. I'll pause it, finish my 8-hour to 9-hour shift. And then that 45-minute ride home, I will finish the episode. So that's like how dedicated, how much of a fanboy I was to be to the Fantasy Footballers, and to be now 3 years later to be having conversations with Mike. And it's like, what the hell is going on? Like, This isn't real. This is a dream. But Mike's an awesome dude, man. He is so down to earth. I told him before, if you go on my Twitter, I was like, yeah, man, you give me Seth Rogen vibes, but he's my favorite actor. So that's cool. And he was like, yeah, I accept that. Like, it's so awesome. Cool, man.
Yeah. And if listeners, if you go listen to that and watch that video, it felt very genuine. Like he wanted to be there. He's just talking fantasy football with you guys. That was awesome. I couldn't let you leave here without congratulating you to get him on your show. That's big time. And they are pioneers. And I remember this year they had their 1,000th show, and that was just cool to listen to.
Amazing.
They're getting all their shout outs from everyone in the industry. And that's what those are the kind of guys we're all looking up to, that we're just trying to create fantasy content and be really good at it. And those guys are really good at it and really keeping down to earth as well. So that's awesome. Go check that out again on Real Deal Fantasy HQ. Go to their YouTube page, check out that video with Mike Wright and your co-host, right? Cody was on there as
Cody.
well.
Yeah.
Want to give him a shout out. Don't want to leave him out. But that was awesome. Before I let you go here, and I will let you go here quickly, but I got to talk about your Rams because it's clear you're a Rams fan. You're not holding anything back there. First, I want to ask, were you a Rams fan before they moved to LA? Have you always been a Rams fan, even when they were in St. Louis?
Yeah, I was a Rams fan before the greatest show on turf. I was a kid. I was a child. I was probably like 9-10 years old. It was the first football game I ever watched. So it was kind of like I saw Marshall Faulk. He started exploding, started being really good. He was like one of my favorite players. Torrey Holt, obviously one of my favorite players. Isaac Bruce. And those guys really just popped to me like, how am I not going to be a fan of them? So I kind of got on the bandwagon when it was good and when it was cool. And then I also stuck through it when those dark days came of Jeff Fisher and we weren't winning games and 8-8 was the joke. And like, I stuck through it all. So being a fan of St. Louis and then now we're back in LA, man, we came out of that clean. We didn't come out of that clean, I should say, but I came out of there happy what we got now. Sean McVay is amazing. To the moon with him.
And now Matthew Stafford. I know that's old news at this point, but as a Rams fan, that's why I got to ask you about it. How are you feeling about Matthew Stafford taking the snaps?
I feel like we got a 2-year window with him. I really don't think he's, the long term that That's what kind of scares me a little bit. He's not the guy that I'm going to see in the next 3-4 years. So we're going to have to hit the draft or hit free agency again, which is very scary because being a Rams fan, we didn't have a quarterback. We had Sean Hill, Austin Davis, Case Keenum, just to name a few guys, you know what I mean, that we were dealing with as our starting quarterback. So when Jared Goff came in, it was kind of refreshing knowing that, you know, he's a top prospect and he was able to come in and kind of slowly but surely make his way to the field. But it's just unfortunate of how things panned out with him. He wasn't as confident as I thought he was. He didn't have that much heart. There was a lot of times where I'll see him slide right before the first down and not take that little bump or take that hit for the team so we can win the game. So there's never been a time that the Rams asked Jared Goff to win the game. There had never been a time where it's like, we won that game because of Jared Goff. It's either we won it because of Gurley or we won it because of our defense. So it was never like asked upon for Jared Goff to come up and win the game from behind. Now, on the flip side, we have Matthew Stafford, who we saw play an entire game with a separated shoulder, come back for the Hail Mary win. So many stories and so many games where we saw Matthew Stafford put himself on the line. That is something I want in our locker room. That is something that I want in this 2-year window where we can go for it all and possibly win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think it'd be smart of LA to go ahead and draft that quarterback now and let him sit and let him learn. Matthew Stafford's a guy that you can learn from. He's a veteran. He's been around for a long time, thrown for 5,000 yards multiple years. Like he's a leader. And if you can get a young guy in there to let him sit, similar to Patrick Mahomes did with Alex Smith, similar to Aaron Rodgers did with Brett Favre back in the day. I mean, it works. And similar to what Jordan Love's doing right now. It works. And that's, I mean, you see teams doing that right now. I think that's what the Saints were trying to do with Jameis Winston. And maybe it just didn't work out the same timing potentially. But you see teams doing that. Bring in the young guys and let them sit behind the veterans. And maybe this is the year LA gets that, you know, later round quarterback. Let him sit, let him learn. And
maybe,
don't spend the first round capital because there's too much that goes with that. And they don't have first round. Well, there's too much that goes with that anyways. Now you feel like, oh, when's he going to play? When's he going to start? They don't need that. They need somebody to actually develop. Not, you know, don't need all the media around it. But I had to ask you about the Rams. You know, being that Rams fan you are, I wanted to make sure I threw that out there. But LQ, let everybody know where can they find you and all of your work that you're doing.
Hey, man, you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at RealDealFantasy. I'm literally everywhere on all social media platforms. I'm active. I'm there pushing out content. I have an episode coming out tomorrow. Can't say what it is just yet, but you're going to be seeing a lot of fire content from me all 2021, man. I got big things on the rise. This summer is going to be a banger, and hopefully we have a full-fledged, full send of a 2021 fantasy football season with no COVID.
Absolutely. That's what we're all working for. I appreciate you joining us here again. Thank you so much. You can follow me on Twitter at Trev's Fantasy Pod. We're on Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts as well. LQ, thanks for your time. Thank you for in the chat. Thanks for all your great content and your input there. Hit the like button on your way out, and we'll see you next time.